Hello, welcome to our webinar. My name is April. My colleague, Stephanie, and I are university students who created this video to help you understand direct-to-consumer genetic testing and to help you answer the question, is it right for me? All right, let's begin. As a disclaimer, this video was produced by students from the Medical Genomics program at the University of Toronto. We have no affiliation with any direct-to-consumer genetic testing companies, and we are not endorsing any product. All attributions can be found at the end of this presentation. In this webinar, we will be referring to direct-to-consumer genetic testing as D2C testing. Our goal is to help you determine whether or not D2C testing is right for you by going over questions you might have about these four main topic areas. 1. What is D2C testing and what does it offer? 2. What are the motivations for wanting or not wanting D2C testing? 3. What should you consider before taking a D2C test? We will be specifically talking about what these D2C tests are able to say and what they aren't able to say about your health and/or ancestry. And 4. The main takeaways to know before making a decision. Before we begin, this webinar does not review all foundational genetics concepts and terms needed to understand D2C testing. If you want to check your knowledge about some of these concepts, we are providing a short 4-question true or false quiz on SurveyMonkey.com. If some of these are unfamiliar, we recommend you take the time to review first. To answer the question of what is D2C genetic testing, we first want to go over the different options for having genetic testing done. Usually genetic testing is done clinically through healthcare providers like doctors or nurse practitioners. They determine what type of genetic test is needed. There are different tests appropriate for different indications. Then they order the test, collect and send the DNA, interpret what the results mean for the patient, and then share the results with the patient. Direct-to-consumer genetic testing, on the other hand, does not need approval from a healthcare provider or insurance company to be ordered. Customers can order this test and receive the results on their own. Now that we've established what D2C genetic testing is, we will look at what the companies offering this service provide. If these 4 people went to a D2C genetic testing company, the company wouldn't be performing a comprehensive genetic analysis. In other words, D2C companies do not look at a person's entire genetic sequence to find all their variants. Because of the technology that D2C companies use, they are only able to look at a small percentage of genetic markers. Genetic variants can be associated with certain phenotypes, and this is usually what D2C companies are reporting. However, everyone has common, natural variations in their DNA, so not all variation is meaningful. Because D2C testing only looks at a selection of markers, they may not offer results about all of the traits or health conditions that interest you. Additionally, each company may look at a different set of markers. From these markers, D2C genetic testing companies can return results to you that can be categorized as non-medical or recreational, which can tell you about individual traits or characteristics, like taste preference. Some D2C genetic testing can also give medically relevant results, such as predictions about health, risk information for specific diseases, and carrier status for specific diseases. Lastly, some D2C testing can give you ancestry or family results by comparing your DNA to the DNA of individuals from a variety of geographic regions. These comparisons will be used to generate an ancestry composition report, which consists of estimates. Now we will move on to why people are interested in D2C genetic testing and where they could possibly go to get it done. People can have multiple reasons for wanting D2C genetic testing. For example, people can be generally curious about their genetic information and what variations they have that affect their individual traits or characteristics. Some are interested in ancestry. Others can be looking for health-related information. Some people even like the idea of contributing to research and allow their data to be accessed for research purposes. However, it is important to note that there may be some cases where you would want to look elsewhere for your needs. For example, D2C genetic testing might not be right for you if you want to make medical management decisions, or if you have a family history of a specific health condition like breast cancer and are concerned you will develop it, or if you are family planning and are concerned that your child will inherit a genetic disease like cystic fibrosis. In these cases, it is recommended that you consult your doctor or healthcare provider about your concerns. There are many D2C genetic testing companies that exist. Here are some that focus on health and/or ancestry. There are also companies that focus on maternity and paternity testing. However, we do not cover them in this webinar. Now we will go over some information to consider before making a purchasing decision to help manage your expectations. Keep in mind that the reports you receive from D2C companies can contain a lot of information, which can be confusing and a lot to take in. It can be hard to anticipate what you'll hear back, and receiving unexpected or unclear results about health, family relationships, or ancestry may be stressful. Additionally, since you share genetic information with your relatives, your genetic test results could impact them too. You may also want to consider regulations for D2C genetic testing companies. Health-related variants are governed by the FDA in the States. In a letter to Health Canada that the Canadian College of Medical Geneticists, or the CCMG, wrote in 2015 asking for some governance in this area, the CCMG highlighted that US-based D2C companies can market different variants to Canadian clientele because of the absence of stringent regulations in this area. Conversely, ancestry testing has no definitive governance both in the US and in Canada. In the United States, the FDA requires labs offering tests for health assessment to be credited by the College of American Pathologists and to have Clinical Laboratory Improvement Amendments certification. These regulations govern the accuracy and consistency of detecting genetic variants, so it's important that you choose a company that follows these regulations. However, there are some important aspects of genetic testing that fall outside of the scope of these regulations. One is clinical validity, which refers to how well the genetic variant being analyzed is related to the presence, absence, or risk of a specific disease. There are also no regulations on the claims a company can make about its services and how helpful they can be for your clinical care. There are no requirements for informed consent or for pre-test and/or post-test counseling. And lastly, these regulations do not apply for results that do not pertain to health, such as ancestry. In this next section, we will talk specifically about health results and the types of results that can be returned to you. In this next section, we will discuss why, if you go to different companies, you may get differing reports on your risk of developing a certain health condition. One reason is that different companies can use different markers to assess your risk. For example, one company may detect a variant in the first person, causing them to report an increased risk. However, a second company may look at a different marker. In this case, they would only detect a variant in the third individual. Another reason for different risks reported is that even if two companies detect the same variant, they may interpret the effect that this variant has on your risk differently. For example, one company might interpret this variant as increasing a risk of developing a certain disease, and another might think that it has no effects. There can be disagreements, especially for variants that haven't been as well researched, where there isn't enough scientific evidence to link that variant with a health condition. As well, sometimes your personal and family medical history is important for interpreting what the change in your DNA means for you. This is why it's important to consult your doctor or healthcare provider who can ask you for this type of information. Lastly, technical error might affect your results. You can have false positives, which means that they detect a variant, but the individual does not actually have it. There can also be false negatives, meaning that the test did not pick up on a variant that is there. The possibility of technical error means that it is important to have your results verified. Since these results could have significant health implications for you, have your test results confirmed clinically before making any medical management decisions. To summarize this section, results can be not entirely informative. You can get different results from different companies, and it is best to see a healthcare provider if you are concerned about your genetic health risks. In this next section, we will discuss ancestry results. Companies offering genetic ancestry testing, GAT, entice customers by using captivating messages such as, "Trace your DNA, find your roots." "Experience your ancestry in a whole new way." And your DNA knows more about you than you do. All of this does admittedly sound very captivating, but there are several factors that you might want to consider prior to ordering a test to ensure that you are properly equipped to interpret your results. There are many reasons why people choose to or not to pursue genetic ancestry testing. Such motivations to seek this kind of testing include, but are not limited to, curiosity or uncertainty regarding your ancestry. You are looking to complement genealogical research. You are using these results to make citizenship claims. You might simply have a scientific or historical interest. You might be seeking to verify oral stories. And there are many other reasons that might be taken into consideration. While genetic ancestry tests can certainly help answer some of these questions or fill in gaps in knowledge, it is important to realize that these tests are providing estimates of ancestry. In order to further understand how these estimates are derived, you will need to know the different types of genetic ancestry tests and the limitations of the computer algorithms that help make sense of this data. There are three main types of ancestry testing being used by D2C companies. Each test relies on genetic material from different parts of the cell. Firstly, Y chromosomal DNA ancestry testing relies on DNA that is located on the Y chromosome. This chromosome is only present in males, so in terms of ancestry, it can be used to detect markers that are passed down through your father's lineage. You might see some companies referring to these lineage-based markers as paternal haplogroups. Second, autosomal DNA testing relies on markers that are found on any of the 22 pairs of non-sex chromosomes. These markers can be used to trace lineages for both males and females. This type of ancestry testing will look at hundreds of thousands of different single nucleotide changes, which can help trace ancestry back several generations. Lastly, there are mitochondrial DNA markers. This is different from what we typically tend to think about when referring to DNA. Mitochondrial DNA is found in the cell's mitochondria, which is not a component of the nucleus. The DNA of the mitochondria is solely inherited from your mother, but both males and females have this mitochondrial DNA. Markers from mitochondria can be used to look much further into the past than autosomal markers, which tend to be limited to approximately 5 generations. Each of these techniques will consequently produce different results. The majority of commercial D2C tests are using autosomal DNA testing to generate ancestry estimates. I will be referring to this type of technique for the remainder of the ancestry section. Autosomal markers, as I previously mentioned, are found all throughout the 22 pairs of non-sex chromosomes. The number of ancestry markers differ between each of the chromosomes. In order to organize all of this information, companies will arbitrarily divide the chromosomes into smaller segments. This is represented here in the figure by the different colored bands seen on the chromosomes. Each segment contains as many as 300 markers. This arbitrary division of chromosomes is performed because it is assumed that each segment is small enough such that it is safe to assume all markers in that particular region came from the same ancestor. Once these arbitrary segments are designated, the computer algorithm can filter through all of the information to assign different chromosomal segments to a particular geographic region. Once the algorithm has filtered through each of the segments, it will generate an ancestry report. D2C companies often produce reports that represent your ancestry in terms of percentages. It is easy to appreciate why conclusions such as "I'm 30% German" may be made based on the language that is used in these reports. However, this is not an accurate description of what has been evaluated by the computer algorithm. There are far more than 700,000 nucleotides in your entire genetic blueprint. Therefore, it would not be correct to state that you are 30% German. Additionally, the markers might have been classified as German origin, but this does not specifically mean that you had ancestors who were 100% German. What it really means is that these markers have been observed in people who are currently residing in Germany, according to the samples that the company has in their database. These reports are therefore inferences about your ancestry. Now that you know how these companies are making their ancestry inferences, it will be important to acknowledge the limitations associated with ancestry testing. These limitations can help explain differences in results from company to company. Firstly, it is important to consider the reference dataset composition, specifically the size and diversity of samples contained within the database. These population databases contain anywhere from 14,000 to 35,000 individuals with known ancestry from approximately 45 populations and regions. Some companies rely on their own customer database to form the major fraction of these reference datasets. An issue with this type of dataset could be biases and overrepresentation of certain populations. Conversely, if we are lacking genetic data for certain populations, it will be hard to make ancestry estimates with a high degree of confidence. Another point to consider is that some markers are observed in multiple populations as a result of interpopulation mating. Some computer algorithms will therefore encounter difficulties when trying to resolve these very slight differences between groups. This is why certain companies will look at the markers on your chromosomes in smaller segments. If some of your segments of DNA bear similarity with numerous different populations, then the algorithm will provide an umbrella population assignment to account for any uncertainty. In such cases, your results may suggest that you are some percentage broadly European, for example. Lastly, unexpected results or variations between companies might be a direct result of the technical limitations of such tests. The algorithms being used are not perfect. Optimization of such programs often presents as a challenge. I will discuss this more in detail in the next few slides. In order to test the performance capabilities of a computer-based prediction tool for ancestry, two different features must be assessed. The first is precision. Precision in this context is asking whether the algorithm made the correct call when it identified a segment of DNA as being from a particular population. Recall, on the other hand, refers to the algorithm's ability to identify all of the DNA segments that are actually from that population. If the algorithm does not pick up on certain segments that are actually true calls, this is a poor recall. Many D2C ancestry companies acknowledge that it is hard to strike a balance between high precision and high recall when designing these algorithms. Companies tend to settle for higher precision at the cost of recall. This design ensures that the computer doesn't mistake DNA segments that correspond to ancestry from two very different populations, but it also means that it might miss some of the segments that should have been identified otherwise. These technical limitations may help explain why we can even see variable ancestry results among related individuals. Take monozygotic twins, for example. Such twins share 100% of their DNA, so you would expect that they would receive exactly the same ancestry results. In reality, this is not always the case because of the technical limitations we have just discussed. The trade-off between precision and recall ultimately accounts for why you might see differences between twins. Let's take a look at the results that might be generated for twin number 1.
In this scenario, the DNA sample will be processed by the D2C company.
All the ancestry markers will be identified, and then the computer algorithm will process the information. We will look at the output on a smaller scale. After processing is complete, the algorithm has identified markers that resemble those observed in German and Polish populations. The precision is high enough that it could correctly identify that there is a difference between these two populations. However, given the poor recall of the system, the algorithm missed one of the markers that were in fact indicative of German ancestry. Only 9 out of 10 of the actual German markers were identified as a result. Twin number 2 is waiting for her results. She is expecting the same ancestry composition report as her sister. She has the exact same markers as her sister, however, the algorithm failed to detect all of the German ancestry-associated markers, despite correctly differentiating between German and Polish markers. So this time around, only 7 out of the 10 actual German markers were identified in the second twin because of the algorithm's poor recall. In this example, results varied even for twins using the same D2C company. You can imagine, given factors such as differing reference dataset composition and methodologies, that results for twins using different companies could be even more puzzling. It is important to remember that the ancestry reports are being presented as estimates in percentage form. These percentages are not meant to be interpreted as exact numbers. They are actually ranges in a specific interval at a threshold that has been pre-selected by the company. Some companies start their threshold at 50% confidence. The lower the confidence threshold, the more permissive some results might be. Accuracy will increase as you increase the confidence threshold. In concluding our discussion on genetic ancestry testing, I hope that you take away 3 main points that can be used to help you appreciate how ancestry tests work and to recognize the limitations that come with this type of testing. Number 1. There are different types of markers that can be used to estimate ancestry. Number 2. Ancestry estimates can be limited or restricted by the reference dataset that is being used. However, datasets are constantly being updated, which is why your ancestry estimates may change over time. And lastly, the algorithms are not perfect. Sometimes they have difficulty differentiating between populations that share some common markers. Additionally, some populations are particularly susceptible to poor recall. Taken together, these technical limitations can possibly explain why you might receive unexpected results, and even variable results between two different D2C companies. To conclude, we will discuss why it is important to understand this information, and we will highlight the main takeaway points from this webinar. The Canadian Medical Association released a couple of documents which stated that they are concerned with understanding, raising awareness of, and mitigating potential patient and societal harms that may arise from D2C genetic testing. They also highlighted that patients have the right to be fully informed about what a D2C genetic test can and cannot say about their health, and that the scientific evidence on which a test is based should be clearly stated and easy to understand. We kept these policy statements in mind when designing this webinar, so hopefully it has shed light on some of these areas where confusion has been known to arise. We hope that you can use these insights to contextualize results and navigate your way through the rapidly expanding realm of D2C genetic testing. In conclusion, we hope that you remember that your results are not the end of the story. It is important to remember that healthcare providers can help to contextualize your results so that they have meaning for you. Additionally, healthcare providers help decipher uninformative results and can verify results from D2C genetic tests if it will help with your medical management. And you should now know that companies performing health assessments are not always regulated. Therefore, making medical management decisions is not advised without consulting with your healthcare provider. With respect to ancestry testing, we hope that you learned that ancestry reports are estimates and are not meant to be treated as concrete numbers. Your ancestry results may vary between companies due to differences in technology, computer algorithm, and reference dataset composition. And remember, only a small subset of your entire genetic blueprint is being assessed to make these predictions. Lastly, unlike some of the companies and tests that are reporting health information, ancestry testing is not regulated or subject to oversight, so be aware of this and look for other means of accreditation. Now that we have finished the webinar, there is another quiz available to you on SurveyMonkey to check your comprehension. Our references are organized by section if you are interested in checking out additional material. We hope that it was helpful in addressing some of your questions and/or concerns. If you have any comments or follow-up questions, check out my Twitter and use the hashtag DTCABCs. This webinar was created under an attribution, non-commercial, share-alike Creative Commons license. We'd like to thank you again for checking out our webinar, and we wish you all the best in your D2C genetic testing endeavors.